Hello students, I'm Hardik Thakkar, a faculty of English department. This video is about a story from Gems of Wisdom. The name of the story is The Lady or the Tiger? This story has two parts. So before we understand them line by line, let's get some brief idea about its author and story. About the author, Frank Richard Stockton was born in 1834 and died in 1902. He was an American writer and a humorist born in Philadelphia in 1834. He was the son of a prominent Methodist minister, and his father always discouraged him from taking up writing as a career. Stockton is best known for a series of original children's fairy tales that were widely popular during the later part of 19th century. His first fairy tale, Ting-a-Ling, was published in 1867 in the Riverside magazine, and his first book collection appeared in 1870. Stockton avoided the educational moralizing that was common to children's story and instead used clever humor to highlight follies such as greed, violence, and abuse of power. He was known for describing the adventures of his characters in an appealing and straightforward manner. Stockton's first major success arrived with the 1879 publication of Rudder Grange, a collection of stories based on a married couple and their servant. The Queen's Museum and the Fanciful Tales and the Adventures of Captain Hall are some of his famous novels, the latter being the third best-selling book in the US in 1895. Some of his popular stories include The Griffin and the Minor Canon and The Bee Man of On. But The Lady or the Tiger is by far one of the most famous tales that won him literary acclaim. About the story, The Lady or the Tiger is a story about a whimsical king who rules as his heart desires and has a strange way of handling out rewards and punishment to people who are presented before him for justice. The story describes how every person tried in front of the king is taken to the public arena and is faced with two doors, behind one of which is a hungry tiger that will devour him if he is guilty, and behind the other is a beautiful lady in waiting, whom he will have to marry if he comes out innocent. The same fate awaits a young man whom the king discovers is in love with his daughter, the princess. While the crowd awaits anxiously to see the young man's fate, he looks upon his beloved princess, who points him to the door on the right. The lover starts to open the door, and the author leaves the story on an open-ended question. Did the princess save her love by pointing to the door which led to the beautiful lady, or did she prefer to see her lover die rather than see him marry someone else? This open-endedness challenges the mind of the reader and compels him or her to think of the possible climaxes to this story while providing an interesting twist in the tale. Part 1. Long ago, there lived a king who was crude and very much like a savage. He had learned some manner from his Latin neighbors, but mostly he was barbaric, loud, and gruff. He had none of the grace and polish of his neighbors. He was a man of great fancies and even greater enthusiasm because he had so much authority as a king. He was able to force someone of these fancies into reality. His personality was normally calm when everything was in order. When there was a little hitch, however, he was exultant and happy. He loved it when things went wrong because that meant that he could then correct them. He loved to make the crooked straight, to crush down the uneven places in life. He decided that there should be a way to add culture to the lives of his subjects. His method was the public arena. The humans and beasts performed before audiences. When the king was interested in people and their crimes, he would dictate that their fate should be decided in the arena. This king knew no tradition from other kingdoms. His only allegiance was to himself and his own fancies. His fancies, the chance that decision in arena, came about because of his romantic yet barbaric and idealism. When all the people had gathered in the galleries and the king was seated on his throne high up on one side of the arena, he would give a signal. A door beneath him would open and the accused person would step out into the amphitheater. Directly opposite the accused, there were two doors, exactly alike and side by side. The person on the trial had to walk over to these doors and open one of them. He could open whichever the door he wanted. He was subject to no pressure from the king or his court. The only influence was that of fate and luck. If the accused opened one door, a hungry tiger came out. It was the fiercest and most cruel that could be found, and it immediately jumped on him and tore him into pieces as a punishment for his guilt. When the fate of the criminal was thus decided, a sad irony bells were rung, and the great wails went up from the hired mourners who were posted outside the arena. The audience went home with bowed heads and doleful hearts, said that one so young and fair or so old and respected should have merited such a fate. If he opened the other door, a lady came out. The king always chose the ladies himself. He made sure that each was of the same age and stations as the accused, and that she was beautiful. The rule was that the accused was to marry her immediately. It didn't matter if he were already married and had a family. Lady was a sign of his innocence. So if the accused already loved another, that other was to be forgotten. It was the king's way. He allowed nothing to interfere with his design. Indeed, immediately after the lady appeared, another door beneath the king opened, and came out a priest, musician, singers, and a troupe of dancers. In a procession, they all cheerfully marched and sang for the couple standing in the middle of the arena. The bell rang. The audience shouted its approval, and the innocent man, preceded by children strewing flowers in the couple's path, led his new bride to his home. This was the king's semi-barbaric method of administering justice, and its fairness is obvious. The criminal could not know which door the lady was behind. He opened whichever the door he wanted to, without knowing whether in the next instant he was to be eaten or married. On some occasions, the tiger came out of one door, and on other occasions, it came out of the other. In this system, there was instant punishment for guilt and instant reward for innocence, whether the accused wanted the reward or not. There was no escape from the judgment of the king's arena. The institution was a popular one. When the people gathered together on one of the trial's days, they never knew whether they were to witness a bloody slaughter or a festive wedding. This element of uncertainty usually made the occasion more interesting than it would have been otherwise. The people were entertained, and no one doubted that justice was being served. All believed that the accused had his fate in his own hands. Part 2. The semi-barbaric king had a daughter whom he loved deeply. She was as passionate, fanciful, and strong as her father, and was devoted to him. As is the case in many fairy tales, this daughter, the apple of her father's eyes, was in love with a young man who was below her in station. He was a commoner. He was also brave, handsome, and daring, and he loved the royal daughter with all his being. The princess had enough barbarism in her that their love affair was dramatic, too dramatic. It was a secret for months, but then the king found out about it. The king didn't hesitate for a minute. He sent a young man to prison and set a date for his trial in the arena. When the date arrived, everyone in the kingdom wanted to attend. They all knew of the king's interest in the case, and there was excitement in the air. The king's men searched the fiercest tiger in the realm. They also searched for the fairest maiden in the land, so that he could have a fitting bride in case he were found innocent. Of course, everyone knew that he had committed the crime of loving the princess, but the king did not allow the facts of the case to alter his decision. The trial would go on as planned. The youth would be gone no matter what happened. He would either be dead or married. The king could enjoy the proceedings for the sport of it. The day arrived. The people were standing in every corner of the arena. All was ready when the moment came. A signal was given and the door was opened, allowing the prince's lover to enter. The crowd gasped. He was handsome. Half the audience did not know that one so attractive had lived among them. No wonder the princess loved him. How terrible for him to be there. The princess had thought about this trial day and night for a long time. She knew she couldn't bear to miss the spectacle. But there was another reason for her being there. She had such power, influence, and force of character, as well as plenty of gold, that she did what no one had ever done before. She found out the secret of the doors for that day. She knew in which room stood the hungry tiger and in which waited the lady. She knew too that the doors were so thick that there was no way anyone could ever hear some hint from behind them. If she were going to warn her lover, She would have to do it by signal. She also knew something which made the whole process more complicated. She knew that the lady was one of the most beautiful maidens in the whole country, and the thought of a young man living with this woman enraged her. She hated the lady and hated what might happen when the accused bowed to the royal box, as was the custom. He looked only at the princess, and immediately he knew. He had expected her to find out the secrets of the dolls, and now he knew that she had the answer. It was only left for her to tell him. His quick glance at her asked which. It was as plain as if he had shouted it. There was no time to lose. The quick questions had to be answered just as quickly so that the king would not suspect. Her right hand was resting on a pillow in front of her. She raised it slightly and made a small, fast movement to the right. No one but her lover saw her. Every eye on the arena was fixed on him. He turned, and with a firm and rapid step, he walked across empty space. Every heart stopped beating. Every breath was held. Every eye was upon him. Without hesitations, he went to the door on the right and opened it. Here now, the writer asks, did the tiger come out of that door, or did the lady? The more we think about this question, the harder it is to answer. It involves the study of human heart, which leads to a mazes of patience, love, hate, and excitement. Do not answer this for yourself, but put yourself in the place of the princess. She was hot-blooded and semi-barbaric, and her soul burned with the twin desires of longing and jealousy. She knew that she had already lost him, but to whom? How often she had kept awake at night imagining the horror of her lover being killed by a tiger. Even in her dreams, she had covered her face with her hands to hide from the cruelty. But how much more often had she seen him at the other door? In her mind, she had screamed and torn her hair when she saw his happy face at the opening the door to the lady. Her soul burned in agony as she saw him rush to that woman and then be wedded in the next moment, when all about her were joyous. She lived through the misery of the procession, the happy couples singing and dancing, the shouts of the crowd were lost in all the joy. Would it be better for him to die at once? Then he could go to the place after death and wait for her. And yet, that awful tiger, those shriek, that blood. Her decision had been made in the instant that she moved her hand. She had known that he would ask, but she had put off her decision until the last moment. She finally decided, and without hesitations, she indicated the right hand door. This is not a question to be taken lightly. Her decision was serious for her, so I do not presume to answer for her. I leave it to all of you. Which came out of the open door? The lady or the tiger? Question mark.